What if everything you love about modern cinema began in a single decade? The 1970s didn't just change movies, it reinvented them. While America unraveled through scandal and war, filmmakers declared revolution. Studios crumbled, auteurs conquered. Audiences witnessed visions so shocking, so groundbreaking, that cinema would never recover. Ready to discover how 7 films from 7 years transformed everything? The journey starts now. 1970. Patton. George C. Scott refused his Oscar for Patton, the only acting winner ever to reject Hollywood's highest honor. The late 1960s had left America divided and questioning its military identity. Director Franklin J. Schaffner and producer Frank McCarthy spent years fighting to bring General George S. Patton's story to the screen, facing resistance from studios who feared a war film would bomb during Vietnam. What they delivered wasn't just another war epic. The film opens with that iconic scene, Scott standing alone before an enormous American flag, delivering a speech so riveting it's been referenced and parodied for decades since. Americans have never lost and will never lose a war, because the very thought of losing is hateful to Americans. The camera pulls back to reveal his pearl-handled revolvers, perfectly polished boots, and unwavering confidence. Scott inhabited Patton so completely that the general's own staff said it was like seeing a ghost. His performance revealed a complex warrior, brilliant but unstable, devoted yet egotistical. When Scott won Best Actor, he telegrammed the Academy, "I respectfully request that you withdraw my nomination. My refusal of the Academy Award is based on my personal contempt for the voting process." He didn't attend the ceremony, watching a hockey game instead. The film's success transformed how Hollywood portrayed military figures, not as one-dimensional heroes, but as complicated humans with flaws and brilliance intertwined. Francis Ford Coppola, who wrote the screenplay before becoming a directing legend, has said this project taught him how to balance spectacle with intimate character study, a lesson he'd soon apply to The Godfather. If you're going to win any battle, you have to do one thing. You have to make the mind run the body. Never let the body tell the mind what to do. Scott's Patton delivered this line with such conviction that it transcended the screen and became a cultural touchstone. Patton swept the Oscars with 7 wins, including Best Picture, proving that audiences crave nuanced storytelling even in traditionally straightforward genres. The film's box office success, over $61 million on a $12 million budget, showed studios that intelligent, complex films could also be commercial hits. 1971. The French Connection. The most dangerous car chase in cinema history wasn't filmed with permits, stunt drivers, or closed streets. Director William Friedkin simply turned Gene Hackman loose in a Pontiac through Brooklyn. New York City in the early 70s was a crumbling, crime-ridden metropolis, the perfect backdrop for a story about a brutal, obsessive cop pursuing French heroin smugglers. Producer Philip D. Antoni had just made Bullitt with Steve McQueen and wanted to top that film's legendary car chase. What he got was something that still makes viewers white-knuckle their armrests 50 years later. The French Connection follows Detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle, a character based on real-life narcotics officer Eddie Egan. Hackman, not the studio's first choice, transformed himself into this morally ambiguous protagonist, racist, violent, but utterly determined. The famous chase sequence where Doyle pursues an elevated train in a civilian car was filmed without proper permissions. Friedkin later admitted, "We had a police siren on top of the car and a police officer with us, but we had no permits to shoot on those streets." The reckless filming approach resulted in multiple real accidents. That moment when Hackman's car crashes into another vehicle, that was an unplanned collision with a local resident driving to work. The production simply paid for damages and kept the footage. Fernando Rey, who played the elegant French villain Alain Charnier, wasn't even Friedkin's intended choice. The director wanted Francisco Rabal, but discovered after flying to Europe that Rabal barely spoke English. Rey stepped in and created one of cinema's most sophisticated antagonists. Do you pick your feet in Poughkeepsie? This bizarre interrogation question became one of the film's most memorable moments, showcasing Hackman's intimidating intensity. When asked about the line years later, Hackman simply replied, "I have no idea what it means. It was just meant to confuse and terrify the suspect. The French Connection grossed over $75 million against a modest $1.8 million budget and swept the Academy Awards, winning Best Picture, Director, Actor, Adapted Screenplay, and Editing. Its gritty realism revolutionized police dramas, replacing the polished procedurals of the 60s with something far more visceral and morally complex. Without The French Connection, there would be no Heat, no The Wire, no Breaking Bad. 1972, The Godfather. Francis Ford Coppola was almost fired 3 times while making what would become the greatest American film of all time. Paramount executives hated his casting, his pacing, and his lighting. The early 1970s found Paramount Pictures desperate for a hit. They acquired the rights to Mario Puzo's novel for a mere $80,000 before it became a runaway bestseller. When the book exploded in popularity, they rushed it into production, but nobody wanted to direct what was seen as just another gangster movie. Coppola was far from the studio's first choice. At 31, he was relatively unknown and deeply in debt from his independent film studio, American Zoetrope. He took the job primarily for the money. The studio fought him on nearly every decision, particularly casting Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone. Brando, once Hollywood royalty, was now considered box office poison due to his difficult reputation. The executives also opposed Al Pacino for the crucial role of Michael Corleone, considering him too short and unknown. Coppola had to fight for his vision, even conducting screen tests at his own expense to prove his casting choices would work. During filming, the studio was so unhappy with the dark, underlit scenes that they assembled a replacement director team ready to take over. "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse." This line, delivered with Brando's cotton-stuffed cheeks and raspy whisper, would become one of the most quoted in film history. Brando's preparation was legendary. He rarely memorized his lines, instead reading them from cue cards. For his audition, he slicked back his hair with shoe polish and improvised the character on the spot. The film's famous opening sequence, a slow pullback from Undertaker Bonacera requesting a favor, was a masterclass in establishing tone and theme. Cinematographer Gordon Willis, nicknamed the Prince of Darkness for his shadowy style, created a visual language that would influence generations of filmmakers. James Caan's portrayal of hot-headed Sonny Corleone was so convincing that after the film's release, he was approached by actual mafia members who complimented his authenticity. Caan later revealed he based some of Sonny's mannerisms on his friend, comedian Don Rickles. The Godfather earned $245 million against a $6 million budget and won 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Its influence is immeasurable, from its deliberate pacing to its complex characterization of villains to its rejection of the bright cinematography that dominated Hollywood. It launched or revitalized careers, Pacino, Brando, Coppola, Robert Duvall, and proved that art and commerce could align perfectly in mainstream American cinema. 1973, The Exorcist. Audience members fainted, vomited, and fled theaters during The Exorcist screenings. One man in New York City charged the screen trying to kill the demon. The film was banned in multiple countries. Director William Friedkin, fresh off his success with The French Connection, wanted to terrify audiences in ways they'd never experienced before. When he read William Peter Blatty's novel about a young girl possessed by a demon, he saw his opportunity. What followed was one of the most troubled and legendary productions in film history. The set caught fire mysteriously, destroying everything except young Linda Blair's bedroom, where the exorcism scenes were filmed. Several actors and crew members reported family members dying during production. The refrigerated bedroom set where most of the possession scenes were shot was kept at near freezing temperatures to capture the actors' visible breath, causing equipment malfunctions and pneumonia for several crew members. For the scene where Blair's character spider walks down the stairs, Friedkin originally used a contortionist, but the effect looked too unrealistic. The scene was cut, only to be restored decades later with digital effects for the director's cut. The infamous crucifix scene caused actress Ellen Burstyn to refuse to speak to Friedkin for years afterward, feeling he had gone too far. "The power of Christ compels you." This desperate incantation from Father Marin became the film's most iconic line, repeated with increasing urgency during the exorcism. Max von Sydow, who played Father Marin, was only 44 when filming, but wore extensive makeup to appear decades older. The special effects team created Blair's demonic appearance through practical means that hold up remarkably well today. Her 360-degree head turn used a life-sized animatronic dummy, while the legendary vomiting scene utilized a complex tube system and a mixture of pea soup and oatmeal. Blair, only 14 during filming, needed extensive therapy afterward. Mercedes McCambridge, who voiced the demon Pazuzu, prepared by swallowing raw eggs, chain-smoking, and drinking whiskey to achieve the guttural, inhuman sounds. She initially went uncredited, leading to a bitter legal battle. The Exorcist earned $441 million worldwide, equivalent to over $2 billion in today's money, and became the first horror film nominated for Best Picture. It transformed the genre, proving horror could be sophisticated, philosophical, and critically acclaimed. Every possession film since, from The Conjuring to Hereditary, stands in its shadow. 1974, Chinatown. Jack Nicholson performed with a bandage on his nose after director Roman Polanski sliced his nostril open with a knife during an on-set dispute. The injury remains visible in the final film. Los Angeles in the mid-70s was re-examining its own history amid political scandals and environmental concerns. Screenwriter Robert Towne spent years researching the California water wars of the early 20th century, crafting a neo-noir masterpiece that explored corruption at the highest levels of society. His screenplay is considered by many to be the most perfect ever written. Producer Robert Evans, riding high after The Godfather's success, fought to maintain Towne's bleak ending against studio wishes. The infamous final line, "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown," almost didn't make it into the film. Polanski insisted on the darker conclusion, drawing from his own tragic past. The film's central mystery, involving incest, water rights, and municipal corruption, was so complex that even the actors sometimes lost track of the plot. Nicholson, at the height of his charisma, played private detective Jake Gittes with a perfect balance of cynicism and buried idealism. His character's bandaged nose became one of cinema's most recognizable images. Faye Dunaway's portrayal of the mysterious Evelyn Mulray remains one of the greatest female performances in film history. Her relationship with Polanski was notoriously tense, culminating in an incident where he refused to let her use the bathroom during a scene. When she protested, he allegedly placed a cup on the floor and told her to use that instead. "She's my sister and my daughter." This revelation, delivered by Dunaway in a moment of desperation, shocked audiences in 1974 and remains powerful today. The scene was filmed in a real car with the actors jammed alongside camera operators in the back seat, creating the claustrophobic intensity that makes the moment so unforgettable. John Huston, who directed noir classics like The Maltese Falcon, was cast as the villainous Noah Cross. His imposing presence and cultured voice created one of cinema's most chilling antagonists, a man whose evil is all the more terrifying for its banality and social acceptance. Chinatown earned $29 million at the box office and won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Its influence extended far beyond cinema, renewing interest in Los Angeles's controversial water history and establishing a visual template for countless films and television shows. Without Chinatown, there would be no True Detective, no L.A. Confidential, no Mulholland Drive. 1975, Jaws. Steven Spielberg's mechanical shark malfunctioned so frequently that he was forced to keep it off screen for most of the film, a limitation that accidentally created one of the most suspenseful movies ever made. The summer of 1975 changed Hollywood forever. Before Jaws, studios released their prestigious films during winter, considering summer a dumping ground for B-movies. Universal Pictures broke tradition with a massive nationwide release supported by unprecedented television advertising. The result was the first true summer blockbuster, a film that had people lining up around the block and single-handedly boosted beach tourism across America. The troubled production nearly derailed Spielberg's career before it began. Filming on the ocean led to boats drifting into frame, seasick crew members, and equipment ruined by saltwater. The mechanical shark, nicknamed Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer, rarely worked, forcing the young director to suggest the shark's presence through John Williams' iconic two-note theme and creative camera work. Roy Scheider, who played Police Chief Brody, improvised one of the film's most famous lines after seeing the shark for the first time. "You're gonna need a bigger boat." This unscripted moment perfectly captured the character's stunned realization and became instantly quotable. Robert Shaw's USS Indianapolis monologue ranks among cinema's greatest speeches. The actor, who struggled with alcoholism, reportedly drank heavily before his first attempt at the scene, rendering it unusable. He returned the next day, sober and prepared, and delivered the chilling story in a single take that left the crew speechless. The film's production went 100 days over schedule and millions over budget. Universal executives considered firing Spielberg, but production head Sid Sheinberg protected the young director. His faith was rewarded when Jaws grossed $470 million worldwide against a $9 million budget. Beyond its commercial impact, Jaws revolutionized how stories could be told on screen. Its opening sequence, where a young woman is attacked by an unseen predator, set new standards for creating tension through suggestion, rather than explicit imagery. The film's structure, with its perfect three-act build culminating in the men versus nature finale, became a template for countless blockbusters that followed. Jaws won 3 Academy Awards and effectively invented the summer blockbuster model that still dominates Hollywood. It catapulted Spielberg from promising newcomer to A-list director and proved that genre films could achieve both critical and commercial success when executed with vision and craftsmanship. 1976. Taxi Driver. Martin Scorsese thought Taxi Driver would be his last film. Nearly bankrupt and addicted to cocaine, he poured his darkness into a movie so disturbing that he was sure it would end his career. New York City in the mid-70s was a cesspool of crime, corruption, and urban decay, the perfect setting for screenwriter Paul Schrader's exploration of alienation. Schrader wrote the script in just 2 weeks during a personal breakdown, living in his car after his marriage collapsed. The screenplay's feverish intensity attracted Scorsese, who saw in troubled Vietnam veteran Travis Bickle a reflection of his own outsider status. Robert De Niro, preparing for the role, got his taxi driver's license and spent months driving cabs around New York City. During filming breaks, he would pick up passengers to stay in character. His physical transformation included a mohawk haircut that was so shocking at the time that he had to wear hats in public to avoid confrontations. The film's most famous scene, De Niro, confronting himself in the mirror with, "You talking to me," was largely improvised. The script simply stated, "Travis looks in the mirror." De Niro later explained he was channeling Bruce Springsteen, who had used similar audience call-outs at concerts De Niro had attended. Jodie Foster, just 12 years old when cast as child prostitute Iris, required extensive psychological testing to ensure the role wouldn't damage her. Her scenes with De Niro were closely monitored, and she later revealed she didn't fully understand the film's darker aspects until she rewatched it as an adult. "Someday, a real rain will come and wash all this scum off the streets." This line encapsulated Travis's distorted worldview and violent messianic complex. It's become so emblematic of urban vigilantism that it's been referenced in everything from comic books to political speeches. The film's climactic bloodbath was initially rated X by the MPAA. Scorsese, in a clever move, desaturated the colors to make the blood less vivid, securing an R rating without cutting a frame. This technique has since become standard practice for directors navigating censorship concerns. Bernard Herrmann, who composed iconic scores for Hitchcock classics, completed Taxi Driver's haunting soundtrack just hours before his death. The jazzy, discordant music perfectly complemented Travis's fractured psyche and New York's nocturnal menace. Taxi Driver won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and earned 4 Academy Award nominations. Its influence transcends cinema. The film has been cited as inspiration for assassination attempts, fashion trends, and countless other movies exploring urban alienation. Without Taxi Driver, there would be no Joker, no Drive, no Nightcrawler. 1977, Star Wars. George Lucas was so convinced Star Wars would fail that he skipped the premiere to vacation in Hawaii. Meanwhile, theater owners were begging for more prints as lines wrapped around blocks nationwide. The mid-70s was dominated by gritty, downbeat cinema, reflecting post-Vietnam, post-Watergate disillusionment. Lucas, inspired by Flash Gordon serials and Joseph Campbell's writings on mythology, dared to create something radically different, an earnest space fantasy filled with optimism and clear moral boundaries. 20th Century Fox gave Lucas $11 million to make his space opera, considered a massive gamble on an unproven concept. Studio executives were so skeptical that they allowed Lucas to keep merchandising rights instead of a higher director's fee, a decision that cost them billions as Star Wars toys, clothing, and tie-ins created a licensing empire. The film's production in Tunisia and London was plagued with problems. The first day of shooting in the desert was disrupted by Tunisia's first rainstorm in decades. Costumes fell apart, props malfunctioned, and crew members doubted Lucas's vision. Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford, all relatively unknown at the time, formed a bond through their shared skepticism about the project's dialogue and concept. "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." This plea, delivered by Princess Leia's hologram, became one of cinema's most iconic moments. The visual effect was achieved through a remarkably simple technique. Fisher was filmed, then the footage was played back on, set to create the holographic appearance. The revolutionary special effects were created by Industrial Light and Magic, a company Lucas formed specifically for Star Wars after discovering Fox had shut down its effects department. Many techniques were invented on the fly, including the use of computer-controlled camera movements to create the dynamic space battles that left audiences breathless. Star Wars opened on just 32 screens, but quickly expanded as word of mouth created unprecedented demand. Its initial $775 million worldwide gross would eventually multiply through re-releases and special editions. The film received 10 Academy Award nominations, winning 7, and special recognition for its groundbreaking visual effects. Beyond its commercial success, Star Wars fundamentally changed Hollywood. It revitalized the concept of the four-quadrant blockbuster, transformed movie merchandising from afterthought to essential revenue stream, pioneered modern visual effects, and created a renewed appetite for hopeful, mythic storytelling after years of cynicism. Without Star Wars, modern franchise filmmaking as we know it simply wouldn't exist. 1978, The Deer Hunter. Michael Cimino added scenes to The Deer Hunter during filming without the studio's knowledge, nearly doubling the budget and running time. Universal executives were furious until they saw the final cut. The late 1970s marked the first time Hollywood directly confronted the trauma of Vietnam. Director Michael Cimino, who had exaggerated his own military service, created a 3-hour epic following steelworkers from Pennsylvania, who enlist and are forever changed by their experiences. The film's unflinching portrayal of war's psychological toll resonated with audiences still processing the conflict's aftermath. Robert De Niro, fresh off Taxi Driver, immersed himself in preparation, living with steelworkers, learning Russian roulette, and performing his own stunts. For the Russian roulette scenes, De Niro insisted on using a gun with a live round in the chamber, though with a protective shield to prevent accidents. The authentic fear on screen came from real danger. Christopher Walken, who played Nick, lost 20 pounds during production to portray his character's deterioration. His haunting performance won him an Academy Award and established him as one of Hollywood's most distinctive actors. Meryl Streep, in one of her earliest film roles, joined the production after her partner John Cazale was cast, knowing he was dying of cancer. Universal tried to replace Cazale when they learned of his illness, but Streep and De Niro threatened to quit if he was removed. One shot, one shot. This mantra, repeated by De Niro's character about deer hunting, becomes a tragic irony when applied to the Russian roulette games. The parallel between hunting and war, the psychological preparation, the moment of violence, the aftermath, forms the film's philosophical core. The controversial Russian roulette sequences, though not based on documented Vietnam War practices, became the film's most iconic scenes. Their intensity was achieved through practical effects and genuine tension on set. Cimino reportedly fired a gun near the actor's ears without warning to capture authentic, startled reactions. The wedding sequence that opens the film was originally scripted as a brief scene, but expanded by Cimino to nearly an hour of screen time. This decision, made without studio approval, established the characters' relationships and community before their world is shattered, a storytelling risk that paid enormous dividends. The Deer Hunter earned $49 million against a $15 million budget and won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Director. Its unflinching examination of war's psychological impact influenced generations of filmmakers and helped America process a conflict it had struggled to understand. Without The Deer Hunter, there would be no Platoon, no The Hurt Locker, no American Sniper. 1979. Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola mortgaged his house and vineyards to finance Apocalypse Now after going millions over budget. He later confessed, "We were in the jungle. There were too many of us. We had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little, we went insane." The late 70s found America still processing Vietnam, and Coppola's hallucinatory adaptation of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness transported the novel's exploration of colonialism to the war's madness. What began as a 14-week shoot in the Philippines stretched to 16 months of catastrophe, nearly destroying everyone involved. A typhoon destroyed sets 3 weeks into filming, forcing a 2-month hiatus. Martin Sheen suffered a heart attack at age 36, crawling away from the set before being found and hospitalized. Coppola replaced original lead Harvey Keitel with Sheen after a week of shooting, then threatened suicide multiple times as the production spiraled out of control. Marlon Brando arrived grossly overweight and unprepared, having not read the source material, forcing Coppola to shoot him in shadow and rewrite the ending on the fly. Dennis Hopper and Brando refused to work together after a long-standing feud, requiring scenes to be shot separately and edited together. The famous opening sequence, Sheen's face superimposed over burning jungle, was filmed after principal photography, when Coppola realized he needed a stronger introduction. Many crew members believed they were making a disaster that would never be released. The horror. Brando's whispered final words as Colonel Kurtz became one of cinema's most quoted lines, despite being improvised during a rambling, incoherent monologue. Coppola sifted through hours of Brando's philosophical musings to extract usable material. The helicopter attack set to Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries required Philippine military helicopters that were frequently recalled to fight actual rebels, interrupting filming. The sequence took months to complete, but created one of the most iconic war scenes ever filmed. The infamous water buffalo sacrifice at the film's conclusion was a real ritual performed by local tribes, filmed without interference. This controversial scene prompted heated debates about filmmaking ethics and cultural documentation versus exploitation. Apocalypse Now premiered at Cannes as an unfinished work in progress and shared the Palme d'Or despite mixed initial reactions. The film eventually grossed $150 million worldwide against a ballooning $31.5 million budget. It received 8 Academy Award nominations, winning for cinematography and sound. Beyond its troubled production and commercial success, Apocalypse Now redefined how war could be portrayed on screen, not as straightforward combat, but as a descent into psychological chaos. Its dreamlike imagery, moral ambiguity, and focus on war's dehumanizing effects influenced countless filmmakers across generations. Without Apocalypse Now, there would be no Full Metal Jacket, no Jarhead, no Zero Dark 30. The 1970s gave us cinema that still haunts our dreams and inspires filmmakers today. 7 directors who refused to compromise. 7 visions that transformed what movies could achieve. 7 films that captured America's contradictions during its most turbulent decade. What masterpiece did we miss? What year's selection would you change? Let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's most transformative eras.